once the public will be open to it, we're going to start focusing mainly on climate. It's going to be our focus. Our focus was to get Trump out of office, right? Without saying it, that's what it was, right? So our next thing is going to be for climate change awareness.
What's up, guys? Static in the Attic. That was Charlie Chester, an appropriate name for this little prick, the CNN technical director, explaining that they are in fact fake news and that they have created stories, aka lied, in order to get the old guy out so that they could get their new guy in, all for the Build Back Better agenda. You guys can go to Project Veritas and check out the full interview. This girl was going out on Tinder dates with him and filmed the whole thing, and he basically just admitted that their whole organization is propaganda. And they had to get rid of the old guy so that they could move forward with their climate clanism. So Build Back Better, this was the whole slogan of this guy that is in there right now. But where did this whole idea come from? It certainly didn't come from the airhead that we've got right now. This was a UN strategy aimed at reducing the risk of people and nations and communities in the wake of future disasters, just in case there was one. It measures into the restoration of physical infrastructure, social systems, blah, blah, blah. The name itself obviously implies that something has happened so that you have to build back better. So they implemented the great toilet paper crisis of 2020 so that they could move forward with this. This plan was from 2015 UN General Assembly. And just like Charlie Chester said at the beginning of the video, the vehicle that will get them there for all of this change that they want is climate change. And now, after spending billions of dollars on research, because we all know you're not going to get a grant unless you're trying to prove that it is man-made action that is causing this, they have this graph, and now they claim that, hey, we've proved it. It's definitive. See, the CO2 and the temperature has been constantly rising since 1880. Well, this graph is completely made up because here's a graph from NOAA from the year 2000. I'm sorry that this is a little bit low resolution. For some reason, NASA is able to take a high-def picture of an extinct volcano on Europa, but they can't upload a 3-color chart in high def. But you can still see that the red line smooth average of temperatures constantly fluctuates higher to lower from 1895 all the way to the year 2000. Now let's look at these charts side by side. Well, it turns out that sometime in the last 20 years, they decided to start changing the data sets to fit their narrative because this new definitive study shows a constant increase of temperatures in the same exact time frame, even though that's not what actually happened. But I'm guessing that there was billions of dollars well spent for the fake scientists. Now let me zoom in a little bit and draw your attention to the period of time between 1985 and 1995, and you can see an obvious warming period here. Let's take a look at the solar cycles when there was higher sunspot numbers during cycle 22. And wow, guess what? The more solar activity, the higher temperatures. I mean, you guys see a correlation there? Again, I'm sorry for the crappy graphics, but you can see a dead-on match from 1985 to 1995. But like I said, if any scientist actually tried to do a study on this, he would never get funded and probably lose his job because he's a denier. But let's get to the meat and potatoes of what I wanted to talk about here. Check out this study from the 1920s. This was published in Scientific American, a reputable source even to this day, supposedly. On the left, you will see a yield of potatoes with, quote, fertilized air. On the right, unfertilized. Here's some cauliflower. On the left, fertilized. Right, unfertilized. And here they show how they conducted this experiment with what they call an open-air carbonic acid fertilizing plant. Now, what do they mean by that? Because that looks like some old industrial building back there. Well, let's see what they mean by carbonic acid. Carbonic acid gas and atmospheric carbonic acid are old terms for what is now usually called CO2 or carbon dioxide. Carbonic acid is the mild acid which results from CO2 dissolved in water. Let's all go back to junior high science when we learned that carbon dioxide is plant food. What happens if you give somebody more and more food, more of the nutrients that help them to thrive and survive? What happens? They grow better, huh? So, in fact, what you are looking at is an industrial plant that is pumping out carbon dioxide, and they are using it to fertilize the air to increase crop yields. I seriously wish I could just mic drop right now, walk away, and the whole world sees this video. They begin by saying, whereas atmospheric air at present is relatively poor in carbonic acid, of which it contains only about 0.03%, or in modern day they say 400 parts per million. Just think about that, 400 parts per million. It's not very much. At an early period in the development of our planet, when this was covered with luxuriant forests, our coal deposits are derived from conjecture. It comprised incomparably greater quantities of this gas. The fact suggests that the idea of heightening the fertility of the soil by increasing its carbonic acid content and thus producing conditions resembling those of antediluvian ages. In order to enable such a process to be carried out on anything like a commercial line, a cheap source of carbonic acid had, of course, to be provided. This was found by Dr. Frederick Rydell in the combustion gases escaping from all factories, but most abundantly from blast furnace, and which so far had been allowed to flow out into the atmosphere without serving any useful purpose. So they set up 3 greenhouses. One was a control where they didn't do anything to the air. The other 2 they experimented with. And they say on account of the careful cleansing and complete elimination of constituents such as sulfur, the gas was found to exert no harmful effects. On the contrary, even a few days after starting the test, there could be observed in the testing room a more luxuriant vegetation than in the checking houses. The leaves of the castor oil plant in the greenhouse supplied with the gas were found to reach more than 1 meter in span, whereas the largest leaf in the checking house, the control room, was only about 58 meters. That's a 40% increase. Plants submitted to the influence of carbonic acid gas also showed a marked advance with regard to their height. With the tomatoes planted in another part of the greenhouse, a crop of 29.5 kilograms was obtained for a given number of fruits, the weight of the same number of fruits in the testing room being 81.3 kilograms. That is 175% more when you add carbonic acid. And then they go on to list several other plants. The smallest increase in yield was 70%. So everything had a huge increase after being subjected to this. So then experiments in the open air were made simultaneously with these greenhouse tests, a square plot of ground being encircled by punctured cement pipes from which a continuous supply of exhaust gases was escaping. They were literally just pumping the gas out of an industrial plant into the ground for these plants to absorb, or the pipes were blowing it in the air through where the field was. So then samples were derived from portions of the checking field, but from the center of the field submitted to the most action of carbonic acid gas, the increase in yield in the case of spinach being found to be 150% increase, potatoes 180% increase, lupines a 174% increase. I'm not sure I've ever eaten a lupine or even know what it is, and barley 100%. The potatoes in the field submitted to the action of carbonic acid gas were found to ripen much more quickly than in the control room. So then they scaled up again and planted a 30,000 square meter plot provided with underground central pipe and branch pipes encircling the length of the plots. Especially favorable results were obtained on this field, with potatoes a 300% increase being recorded in connection with the tests. All experiments so far made go to show that fertilizing the air by means of carbonic acid gas is a much more efficient process than even increased fertilization of the ground with stable manure and cow dung. So there you have it, guys. They've known for 100 years that if you fertilize the air with CO2, you get higher crop fields. Now, what also happens if you pump a bunch of CO2 in the direction of plants? They use it for photosynthesis and they produce more oxygen. I was talking to my buddy Pat the other day, and we were talking about how everything, seriously, everything you see in the media right now is an outright lie. Just like the new cover of Time magazine here, due to carbonic acid, the whole world's going to set on fire. And it's to the extent that I read an article the other day that said that everyone is fleeing California right now due to climate change. It has nothing to do with the totalitarian tactics that they have been using, taxing people up to 50% of their income. It has nothing to do with that. They're reporting it as escaping climate change. And here's the sad part is everyone trying to escape that totalitarian government is going to move to new areas, vote the exact same way, and keep these pricks in power and screw up every other state. Don't feed the politicians, kids. Static out.